What if Robert Baratheon learned Jon Snow's true parentage? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The Great Hall of the Red Keep rings with the sound of victory. 3 months have passed since Robert Baratheon crushed the last Targaryen loyalists at the Battle of the Trident and claimed the Iron Throne. Tonight, the new king celebrates his triumph with a feast that makes the very stones of Aegon's castle shake with laughter and song. Robert sits at the high table, his massive frame filling the ornate chair that serves as his throne during meals. Wine flows like water, and the king's face is flushed with drink and satisfaction. At his side, Queen Cersei watches with practiced grace, though her golden hair catches the torchlight as she turns to whisper something, cutting about the northern lords to Jaime. "A toast!" Robert roars, lifting his cup high above his head. The hall falls silent as 500 voices cease their conversation. "To the death of the dragon! To the end of the Targaryen line! May their line be forgotten and their spawn wiped from the face of the earth!" The hall erupts in cheers. Cups clank together as lords and ladies drink to their new king's words. Robert drains his wine in one massive gulp, then slams the empty goblet down on the table so hard that the wood groans. But at a table near the back of the hall, Lord Howland Reed sits in perfect stillness. The small lord of Greywater Watch stares at his untouched cup of wine. His weathered hands tremble slightly as Robert's words echo in his mind. The dragon's spawn, wiped from the earth. Howland closes his eyes and sees her again. Lyanna Stark, pale as winter snow, lying in that bed of blood in the Tower of Joy. Her voice, barely a whisper, begging him to promise. Begging him to protect the child. "Promise me, Howland," she had said, her fingers weak as they gripped his hand. "Promise me you'll help Ned keep him safe. Robert will kill him if he knows. You know he will." Howland had given his word. He had helped Ned carry the secret out of Dorne and back to the north. For 3 months, he has held his tongue while Robert celebrates the death of every Targaryen child. For 3 months, he has watched the new king drink and laugh while calling for the extinction of dragon blood. The revelry continues around him. Lord Tywin Lannister speaks quietly with Grand Maester Pycelle about the realm's new order. Sir Barristan Selmy stands guard behind the king's chair, his white cloak pristine, despite the chaos of war. Wine-flushed lords swap stories of battles fought and enemies defeated. Robert calls for another toast. "To my beloved Lyanna," he shouts, his voice cracking with emotion and drink. "Stolen from us by that silver-haired devil. But she has been avenged. Rhaegar Targaryen is dead, and his line dies with him." The words hit Howland like a physical blow. His cup slips from nerveless fingers and shatters on the stone floor. Red wine spreads across the flagstones like blood. Like the blood that soaked Lyanna's birthing bed. Like the blood on Rhaegar's chest when Robert's hammer found its mark at the Trident. Several lords turn to look at the commotion. Howland stares at the broken cup, his mind racing. Every toast makes it worse. Every celebration of Targaryen death feels like betrayal. How can he sit here and smile while Robert unknowingly calls for the murder of Lyanna's child? The king is speaking again, but Howland no longer hears the words. He sees only Lyanna's face, desperate and dying, making him swear to protect her son. He sees the infant in Ned's arms, small and helpless, with eyes that would grow dark as a Stark's, but blood that ran silver with dragon fire. Ned is traveling north even now, carrying the child back to Winterfell under the lie they constructed together. The bastard Jon Snow, born to a tavern wench named Willa, the perfect deception to hide the truth that would destroy them all. But the weight of it is crushing him. Every laugh from the high table, every cheer for Targaryen death, every time Robert speaks Lyanna's name with that broken devotion in his voice, it all makes the secret burn like poison in Howland's chest. Robert has begun another story, this one about the battle where Prince Rhaenys and Prince Aegon met their end. The king's voice carries a note of savage satisfaction as he describes how Tywin's men ensured no Targaryen children would survive to threaten his reign. Even the babe, Robert says, gesturing with his refilled cup. Even little Aegon. Better that they die young than live to plot against the realm. The seed is strong in that cursed line. Better to root it out completely. The words echo in the sudden quiet of Howland's mind. Better to root it out completely. He looks up at Robert's face, flushed with wine and righteousness, and sees exactly what would happen if the truth came out. There would be no mercy for Lyanna's son, no consideration for an infant's innocence. Robert would see only Targaryen blood and demand its spilling. But as Howland sits frozen in his chair, watching the king celebrate the extinction of a line that still lives in secret, something breaks inside him. The burden of the lie becomes too heavy to bear. His promise to a dying woman wars with his loyalty to the man who loved her. The truth claws at his throat like a living thing, demanding to be spoken. Robert raises his cup again, and his voice booms across the hall. To the future, to peace, to a realm finally free of dragons. The cheers wash over Howland like a tide, but all he can hear is Lyanna's whisper. Promise me, promise me, promise me. He stands slowly, his chair scraping against the stone. Lords near him turn to look, but Howland's eyes are fixed on the king. His mouth opens, and words tumble out before he can stop them. Your Grace. His voice is quiet, but something in his tone cuts through the noise. Conversations die around him as heads turn. Your Grace, I must speak with you. Robert looks down at the small lord with bleary eyes. Wine has made him generous and loud, ready to hear any tale of war or victory. Lord Reed, the hero of the Tower of Joy, speak, my friend. What words do you have for your king? Howland's throat is dry as sand. Every eye in the hall seems to be on him now. He thinks of Ned, somewhere on the road north, trusting him to keep the secret. He thinks of the infant Jon, innocent of everything except the blood in his veins. He thinks of Lyanna, dead in dawn, counting on them both to keep her son alive. But Robert is waiting, and the words are already climbing toward his lips like water finding its way downhill. Your Grace, Howland says again, his voice growing stronger. The child lives. Lyanna's son lives. The great hall falls into perfect, terrible silence. The silence stretches across the great hall like a blade drawn tight. 500 guests stare at the small lord from the neck, their minds struggling to process what they have just heard. Robert Baratheon sits frozen on his chair, wine cup halfway to his lips, his face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and the first stirrings of rage. What did you say? Robert's voice is low and dangerous, the jovial drunk vanishing like morning mist. The cup clatters to the table, forgotten. What did you just say to me? Howland Reed stands before the assembled might of the Seven Kingdoms, his weathered face pale but resolute. There is no taking back the words now. The secret that has burned in his chest for 3 months finally stands naked in the torchlight. Lyanna's son lives, Your Grace. The child she bore to Prince Rhaegar. Ned carries him north even now. The hall erupts. Lords shout questions and denials. Ladies gasp behind their hands. Chairs scrape against stone as men leap to their feet. But Robert's roar cuts through it all like thunder. Silence! The king rises slowly from his seat, his massive frame towering over the high table. His hands shake with fury, not wine. His blue eyes, once warm with celebration, now burn with a cold fire that makes hardened knights step backward. "You lie," Robert says, his voice deadly quiet. "You lie, or you are mad. Lyanna died a maid. She died pure, stolen away by that dragon prince, but never touched by his filth." Howland meets the king's gaze without flinching. "I was there, your grace. I was with Ned at the Tower of Joy. I held your sword while he spoke her last words. She made us promise to protect her son." Robert's face goes white, then red, then white again. His mouth works soundlessly for a moment, before words explode out of him like molten iron. "No, she would never. She was good and pure, and that silver-haired devil stole her. She never willingly—" He stops, his voice breaking. The hall watches their king crumble before their eyes. Lord Tywin Lannister rises smoothly from his seat at the high table. The old lion moves with calculated grace, his green eyes already assessing the political implications of this revelation. He speaks with the voice of cold reason, cutting through Robert's emotional storm. "Your grace, if this is true, then we face a crisis that threatens the stability of your reign. We must convene the small council immediately." Robert whirls on him, fury and betrayal written across his features. "Crisis? Crisis? My best friend has been harboring Rhaegar's spawn, raising the dragon's whelp, while I sit the throne that should have protected the realm from that cursed blood." Jon Arryn, the aged hand of the king, rises with careful dignity. His weathered face shows deep concern as he looks between Robert and Howland. The man who raised Robert and Ned as his own sons recognizes the magnitude of what is happening. "Your Grace, we must speak privately. This matter requires careful consideration, not careful consideration." Robert's laugh is harsh and bitter. "The dragon's spawn lives, and you speak of consideration. I should have torn down the north stone by stone until I found him." But even through his rage, Robert recognizes the wisdom in counsel. Too many eyes watch them now. Too many ears hear words that could shatter kingdoms. He gestures sharply toward the door behind the high table. "Small council. Now, clear the hall." Servants and guards move with practiced efficiency, ushering bewildered guests toward the exits. Lords and ladies file out in shocked silence, their minds already racing with the implications. Within minutes, only the core of Robert's government remains in the vast hall. Lord Tywin takes his place at the council table, with the satisfaction of a man whose predictions are coming true. He has always known that trust in honor leads to weakness. Now Robert learns that lesson in the cruelest way possible. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffles forward, his chains clinking softly. His rheumy eyes dart nervously between the king and Howland Reed. Varys materializes from the shadows like silk-made flesh, his powdered face showing carefully crafted concern. Sir Barristan Selmy stands guard at the door, his hand resting on his sword hilt. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard has served 3 kings, but he has never seen political crisis birth so suddenly from personal betrayal. Robert begins pacing like a caged wolf. Each step echoes in the now empty hall. His voice, when he speaks, carries the weight of absolute authority, tinged with madness. "Ned Stark has betrayed me. My brother in all but blood has sheltered the son of my greatest enemy. For 3 months, I have sat this throne while a Targaryen lives and grows strong." Tywin leans forward, his voice smooth as honey over steel. "Your Grace, we must consider the implications carefully. If you act rashly, Robert spins to face him. I should call my banners and burn Winterfell to ash. I should hunt down every man, woman, and child who knew of this, and feed them to the flames. Jon Arryn steps between them, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent managing crises. Robert, you must think beyond your anger. Ned Stark commands the loyalty of the entire North. If you move against him openly, he has betrayed me. Robert's roar shakes the rafters. Everything I believed about him, everything I trusted, was a lie. He swore to me that Lyanna died pure, died clean, but she bore a dragon's spawn, and he hid it from me. Varys speaks for the first time, his voice soft as silk but sharp as steel. Your Grace, if I may, the implications extend beyond Lord Stark. If this child exists, others may seek to use him. The Targaryen name still carries power in certain circles. Robert's eyes narrow as he stares at the spy master. What do you know of this? Nothing concrete, Your Grace. But whispers travel, and bastards have been known to claim thrones. The boy's very existence threatens your reign, regardless of Lord Stark's intentions. Tywin nods approvingly. The spy master understands the game. Your Grace, we must act swiftly but intelligently. Send word to Lord Stark immediately. Demand his return to King's Landing with the child. Once they are here, he doesn't need to finish the sentence. Robert's breathing is heavy, labored with rage and wine. The king's massive hands clench and unclench as he processes the betrayal, the threat, the impossible choice before him. A raven, Robert says finally. Send a raven north. Tell Ned Stark that his king commands his immediate return. Tell him to bring the bastard. Tell him... His voice breaks slightly. Tell him that if he does not come willingly, I will come to him with fire and sword. Jon Arryn's face shows deep pain. He has watched these two boys grow to men, bound by friendship, deeper than blood. Now he watches that bond shatter like ice in spring. Your Grace, perhaps if you... Do it! Robert slams his fist on the table. Send the raven now! Pycelle bows deeply. It shall be done, Your Grace, though it will be several days before... Several days? Robert's eyes flash dangerously. How long has Ned been travelling? When will he reach Winterfell? Howland Reed speaks quietly from his position near the door. He left King's Landing 5 days ago, Your Grace. If he travels at normal pace with an infant, perhaps another week to 10 days. Robert's face twists with fresh fury. 10 days. 10 days of freedom for the dragon's spawn while I sat here in ignorance. The king stalks to the great windows overlooking Blackwater Bay. The moon hangs full over the water, casting silver light on the waves. But all Robert sees in that light is silver hair and purple eyes. All he hears in the wind is Rhaegar's voice, whispering poison in Lyanna's ear. Leave me, he says without turning around. All of you, leave me. Except you, Lord Reed. You stay. The small council files out in worried silence. Tywin catches Varys's eye as they leave, a look that speaks of private conversations to come. Jon Arryn pauses at the door, his aged face heavy with sorrow, before following the others out. Robert and Howland stand alone in the vast hall. The king's breathing is the only sound, harsh and ragged in the silence. When he finally speaks, his voice is broken glass. Tell me everything, every word she spoke, every moment of her dying. Tell me how my Lyanna became mother to a dragon's spawn. Outside, the moon continues its silent journey across the sky, illuminating a kingdom that will never be the same again. The gates of Winterfell open with a grinding of ancient iron and stone. Lord Eddard Stark rides through the courtyard of his ancestral home, his face grey with exhaustion and the weight of secrets. In his arms, wrapped in furs against the northern cold, baby Jon sleeps peacefully, unaware that his very existence has already begun to shake the foundations of the Seven Kingdoms. Catelyn Stark waits in the courtyard, her auburn hair catching the weak autumn sunlight. Her face shows the careful mask of a lady greeting her lord husband, but her eyes linger on the bundle in his arms, the child she has dreaded since the raven announcing Ned's return reached Winterfell days ago. "My lord," she says formally, offering a curtsy. "Welcome home." Ned dismounts slowly, his movements careful to avoid disturbing the sleeping infant. When he speaks, his voice carries the weariness of a man who has travelled far, with a burden heavier than any sword. "Cat, it's good to see you." She looks at the child in his arms, this living reminder of her husband's dishonour. Her jaw tightens slightly, but her voice remains level. "This is the bastard. His name is Jon," Ned says quietly. "Jon Snow." The name hangs in the air between them like a challenge. Catelyn's blue eyes flash with something between hurt and anger, but she says nothing more. The courtyard is full of watching eyes, servants, guards, stable hands who have served House Stark for generations. This conversation will wait for privacy. Old Nan shuffles forward from the shadows of the keep, her weathered face creased with curiosity and kindness. She has tended Stark children for longer than anyone can remember, and her eyes soften when they fall on the infant. "A babe, my lord. Born in the south, was he?" Ned nods, grateful for her gentle presence. "He'll need care, Nan. His mother—" He pauses, the lie catching in his throat. "His mother died birthing him. A girl named Willa." Old Nan reaches for the child with practiced hands. Jon stirs slightly in the transfer, but settles quickly against her familiar touch. She studies his face with the careful attention of someone who has seen many Stark babes through their first years. "Strong features," she murmurs. "Dark hair like yours, my lord. He'll be a handsome one, this Jon Snow." Catelyn watches the exchange in silence, her hands clasped tightly before her. Every kind word about the bastard feels like salt in an open wound. She turns without another word and walks toward the keep, her posture rigid with suppressed emotion. The weeks that follow establish the new reality of Winterfell. Jon Snow becomes part of the household, tended by old Nan and wet-nursed by one of the servant women who recently gave birth. He grows quickly, his dark eyes alert and curious, his small hands grasping at anything within reach. Catelyn maintains a cold distance from the child. She never holds him, never speaks his name if she can avoid it. When others comment on his health or development, she finds pressing business elsewhere. The bastard is a constant reminder that even honorable Ned Stark is merely a man, capable of betraying his marriage vows in a moment of wartime weakness. Ned, meanwhile, finds himself drawn to the boy despite the danger his presence represents. He watches Jon sleep in the nursery, seeing Lyanna's features beginning to emerge in the shape of his nose and the set of his jaw. Every day brings new terror that someone will notice what Ned sees, the ghost of his sister in this child's face. Maester Luwin observes the household's new dynamic with the careful attention of a scholar. He notes Catelyn's avoidance of the bastard, Ned's protective hovering, and the way the servants have quickly accepted Jon as part of the family. But he also notices something else, the way Ned's eyes dart to the horizon when he thinks no one is watching, as if expecting unwelcome visitors. 3 weeks after Ned's return, those expectations prove prophetic. The raven arrives in the early morning, its black wings cutting through grey autumn sky like an omen. The bird circles the rookery once, before settling on the perch reserved for royal correspondence. Maester Luwin retrieves the message with hands that tremble slightly as he recognizes the seal. The three-headed dragon of House Targaryen, pressed into red wax, has been struck through with Robert's crowned stag. But it is not the royal seal that makes Luwin's blood run cold. It is the way the wax has been pressed, hard and angry, cracking at the edges. He finds Ned in the godswood, sitting beneath the heart tree, with Jon sleeping in his lap. The ancient weirwood's red leaves whisper in the wind, and its carved face seems to watch them with knowing eyes. Ned looks up as Luwin approaches, and something in the Maester's expression makes his heart skip. "A message from King's Landing, my lord. From his grace." Ned takes the scroll with steady hands, but Luwin notices the slight tremor in his fingers as he breaks the seal. The message is brief, written in the heavy script of a man barely containing his rage. "Lord Stark, return to King's Landing immediately. Bring the bastard. Bring Rhaegar's spawn, or I will come north and take him myself. Your king commands this. Robert." The parchment flutters to the ground like a dying bird. Ned stares at it for a long moment, his face cycling through shock, understanding, and finally a kind of grim acceptance. The secret is out. Somehow, impossibly, Robert knows. "My lord." Luwin's voice is carefully neutral, but his eyes are sharp with intelligence. "What does his grace command?" Ned looks down at Jon, still sleeping peacefully against his chest. The child's face is serene, unmarked by the knowledge that his existence has just shattered a kingdom. When Ned speaks, his voice is hollow. "Prepare for a journey south, Maester Luwin. His grace requires my immediate presence in King's Landing." "And the child?" The question hangs in the air like a sword. Ned's hands tighten protectively around Jon's small form. "He comes with me." Luwin nods slowly, but his expression shows deep concern. "My lord, if I may." The tone of this message suggests, perhaps it would be safer if the boy remained here. "No." Ned's voice is sharp with finality. "I will not hide behind Winterfell's walls while others face Robert's wrath for my choices. Jon goes where I go." That evening, Ned tells Catelyn of the summons. They stand in their private chambers, the fire crackling in the hearth, baby Rob sleeping in his cradle nearby. Ned shows her Robert's message, watching her face as she reads the damning words. "Rhaegar's spawn?" Catelyn's voice is barely a whisper. "Ned, what does this mean?" He sits heavily in his chair, suddenly looking older than his 22 years. "It means the secret I have carried is secret no more." "What secret?" "Ned, you're frightening me." Ned looks at his wife, his good, honest wife, who has never deserved the burden of his lies. When he speaks, his voice is filled with exhaustion. "Jon is not my bastard, Cat. He never was. He is my nephew, Lyanna's son." The silence that follows is deafening. Catelyn stares at him as if he has spoken in a foreign tongue. Her mouth opens and closes without sound before she finally finds her voice. "Lyanna's, but she died a maid. She was stolen by Prince Rhaegar. But you said she died pure. She died in childbirth, at the Tower of Joy. She made me promise to protect her son, to keep him safe from Robert's wrath." Ned's voice breaks slightly. "She knew what Robert would do if he learned the truth." Catelyn sinks into her own chair, her mind reeling. "Then Jon is... he's Rhaegar Targaryen's son, the last dragon, and Robert means to kill him for it." The revelation hits Catelyn like a physical blow. For weeks, she has resented this child, hated him for representing her husband's infidelity. Now she learns he is not her husband's shame, but her good sister's son, a boy whose only crime is the blood in his veins. "What will you do?" she asks quietly. Ned stares into the fire, watching the flames dance and flicker. "I will go south. I will take Jon to King's Landing and hope that somewhere in Robert's heart there remains enough love for Lyanna to stay his hand. And if there isn't—" Ned's hand moves to the pommel of ice, his great Valyrian steel sword. "Then I will do what I must to keep my promise to my sister." Outside their window, snow begins to fall, the first of winter. The flakes drift down like white tears, covering Winterfell in a shroud of cold silence. In the nursery, Jon Snow sleeps on, dreaming infant dreams, unaware that the world is reshaping itself around his small existence. The North remembers, the old saying goes, but soon, Ned fears, there may be precious little left to remember. In the solar of the Tower of the Hand, Lord Tywin Lannister sits across from his daughter, with the satisfaction of a master strategist, watching his enemies destroy themselves. Queen Cersei perches on the edge of her chair like a golden cat, her green eyes bright with anticipation as her father unfolds the political landscape before her. "The Starks have handed us a gift beyond price," Tywin says, his voice smooth as honey poured over steel. "Robert's trust in Eddard Stark was the foundation of his rule. Now that foundation crumbles, and we shall be the ones to build anew upon its ruins." Cersei leans forward, her beautiful face animated by vindictive pleasure. She has never forgiven Ned Stark for refusing Robert's offer to make her his queen, choosing instead to honor his betrothal to Lyanna Stark. That the Stark girl died before the wedding only made the slight burn deeper. "How long have you known about the bastard?" she asks, her voice carrying the edge of steel beneath silk. "I suspected something was amiss when Lord Reed made his confession," Tywin replies. "A man does not harbor such guilt over revealing a simple bastard. But the exact nature of the secret, that was a pleasant surprise. Through the tall windows of the solar, they can see the city sprawling below them. Smoke rises from countless chimneys, and the harbor is thick with ships bearing the banners of various houses. But Tywin's attention is focused entirely on the Game of Thrones, and how this crisis reshapes the board to his advantage. Robert's rage has made him vulnerable, Tywin continues. His emotional response to betrayal blinds him to political necessity. This presents opportunities for those clear-sighted enough to seize them. Cersei's laugh is like silver bells touched with poison. "And what opportunities do you see, father?" Tywin rises and moves to a large map of Westeros mounted on the wall. His finger traces the borders of the north, then moves south to the Riverlands, the Vale, and finally the Westerlands. Each movement is calculated, precise. The North has always been too independent, too strong. Their loyalty to House Stark runs deeper than their loyalty to the Iron Throne. This incident provides the perfect justification to reduce their power permanently. By force? By necessity. Tywin's smile is cold as winter. Robert will demand justice for Stark's deception. That justice will require northern submission or northern destruction. Either outcome serves our interests. A soft knock at the door interrupts their conversation. A servant enters and bows deeply. "My lord, His Grace requests your immediate presence in the throne room. He says Lord Stark has arrived." Tywin and Cersei exchange meaningful looks. The game's next phase is about to begin. They make their way through the corridors of the Red Keep, past tapestries depicting the conquest of Aegon and the glory of dead kings. Servants and courtiers bow as they pass, but Tywin notices the tension in their movements, the way conversations die when they approach. Word has spread through the castle like wildfire. The king's best friend has betrayed him, and dragons live when all thought them dead. The throne room is already crowded when they arrive. Lords and ladies of the court cluster in nervous groups, their voices hushed but urgent. The Iron Throne looms over them all, its twisted mass of swords catching the light from the high windows and throwing jagged shadows across the floor. Robert sits upon the throne, but he does not wear his crown. His massive frame seems diminished somehow, hunched forward, as if the weight of betrayal has aged him years in a matter of days. His blue eyes, normally warm with laughter or bright with battle fury, are cold as winter seas. The great doors at the far end of the hall groan open, and silence falls like a blade. Eddard Stark walks into the throne room with measured steps, his grey eyes fixed on his king. He carries baby Jon in his arms, the child wrapped in furs against the cold. The sight of the infant sends whispers through the crowd, like wind through dry leaves. Tywin positions himself near the throne, close enough to offer counsel, far enough to avoid being caught in the storm of royal fury. He watches everything with the calculating gaze of a man who sees opportunity in every crisis. Ned stops before the Iron Throne and goes to one knee, careful not to disturb the child in his arms. His voice, when he speaks, is steady despite the tension crackling through the air. Your Grace, I have come as commanded. Robert stares down at his oldest friend, the man he once loved as a brother. The silence stretches until it becomes almost unbearable. When the king finally speaks, his voice is hollow as an empty grave. Show me. Ned hesitates for just a moment, then draws back the furs to reveal Jon's sleeping face. The infant is perhaps 6 months old now, his features more defined than when he left Winterfell. Dark hair crowns his head, and though his eyes are closed in sleep, the shape of his face carries an echo of something that makes Robert's breath catch. Lyanna, Robert whispers, and for a moment his anger cracks to reveal the raw pain beneath. Yes, Ned says quietly. He has her look about him. The admission hangs in the air like a sword. Robert's face cycles through grief, rage, and something approaching madness. His hands grip the arms of the Iron Throne until his knuckles turn white. Lyanna's son, he says, his voice growing stronger and more dangerous with each word. Born of rape by that silver-haired devil. Born of the violation of the woman I loved. Your Grace, Ned begins, but Robert cuts him off with a roar. Silence! You dare speak to me of this? You, who swore she died pure. You, who let me believe she went to her grave untouched by Targaryen filth. Ned rises slowly, Jon stirring in his arms. She made me promise, Robert. She was dying and she feared. She feared I would do my duty to the realm. Robert's voice echoes off the stone walls. She feared I would kill the dragon's spawn as any righteous king would. Tywin steps forward with perfectly calculated timing. His voice cuts through the emotional storm with the precision of a master manipulator. Your Grace, if I may, this deception runs deeper than simple protection of a bastard. Lord Stark has harbored a Targaryen claimant for months while serving as your friend and bannerman. Such betrayal strikes at the very foundation of your authority. Robert's eyes fix on Tywin with desperate gratitude. Here at last is someone who understands the magnitude of the betrayal. Someone who sees the political implications beyond personal hurt. Exactly, Robert says, his voice gaining strength. How can any lord trust their king if the king's own friends hide Targaryen pretenders in their halls? Ned's face shows a flash of anger. Jon is an infant, not a pretender. He threatens no one. He threatens everything! Robert slams his fist against the throne's armrest. His very existence is a challenge to my rule. Every Targaryen loyalist in Westeros will see him as their rightful king." Cersei speaks for the first time, her voice silk wrapped around steel. "Perhaps, Your Grace, this reveals a larger problem. If the North cannot be trusted to report such vital intelligence, how can they be trusted to govern themselves?" The Queen's words land like carefully aimed arrows. She watches Ned's jaw tighten with satisfaction, remembering every slight she has endured since Robert's war began. Tywin nods approvingly. Her Grace speaks wisdom. This incident demonstrates the need for closer oversight of the great houses, for the realm's security. Robert looks between his wife and his hand, then back at Ned. The friend of his youth seems like a stranger now, holding the child of his greatest enemy, having lied to his face for months. "What am I to do with you, Ned?" Robert asks, and for a moment his voice is almost pleading. "What am I to do with this dragon's spawn you've been hiding?" Before Ned can answer, Jon wakes in his arms. The infant's eyes open, dark as a Stark's, but with something in their depths that makes Robert flinch. For a heartbeat, king and child stare at each other across the throne room's vast space. Then Jon begins to cry, a thin wailing that seems to echo the kingdom's pain. Tywin watches it all with the cold satisfaction of a man whose plans are falling into place. The friendship between Robert and Ned is dying before his eyes, killed by truth and political necessity. In its death throes, the foundation of Robert's reign crumbles, leaving space for new alliances, new dependencies, new opportunities for those clever enough to seize them. The old lion smiles and begins to plan his next move. The silence in the throne room stretches like a bowstring drawn too tight. Robert stares down at the child in Ned's arms, his face cycling through emotions too complex for words. Love for Lyanna wars with hatred for Rhaegar. Trust in Ned battles against the sting of betrayal, and duty to the realm clashes with the bonds of brotherhood forged in youth. When the king finally speaks, his voice carries the weight of absolute authority, tinged with madness. The child dies. The words fall like hammer blows on an anvil. Ned's grip tightens protectively around Jon, who has stopped crying, and now stares up at his uncle with dark, trusting eyes. The court holds its collective breath, sensing they are witnessing the moment that will define Robert's reign. "Your Grace," Ned says, his voice steady, despite the chaos in his heart. "This is Lyanna's son, your beloved's child. Would you murder the last piece of her that remains in this world?" Robert's face twists with pain and rage. She was defiled by that silver-haired devil, polluted by dragon seed. What remains of my sweet Lyanna in this abomination? The cruelty of the words hits Ned like a physical blow. He steps forward, his grey eyes flashing with rare anger. "You speak of defilement, of pollution. This child is innocent of everything save the blood in his veins. He is Lyanna's son, Robert. She loved him enough to die bringing him into this world." "She died because of him!" Robert roars, rising from the Iron Throne like an avalanche of fury. "She died birthing a dragon's spawn. If she had never been taken, if that prince had never touched her, she would be alive. She would be my queen." The pain in Robert's voice is so raw that even his enemies feel it. But Ned's own pain runs deeper, fed by months of carrying Lyanna's dying words, her desperate plea to keep her son safe. He knows what she would say if she could see this moment. She chose this, Robert. Lyanna chose to protect her son with her last breath. She made me swear to keep him safe, not from war or battle, but from your hatred of his father's blood. "Lies!" Robert's bellow echoes off the stone walls. "Lyanna would never willingly lie with that monster. She was pure. She was good. She was—" She was a woman who made her own choices. Ned's voice cuts through Robert's rant like steel through silk. And her choice was to save this child, even at the cost of her own life. Lord John Arryn steps forward, his aged face heavy with sorrow. The man who raised both Robert and Ned as his own sons recognizes the magnitude of what is happening. The bonds of love and trust that held the realm together are tearing apart before his eyes. "Your Grace," John Arryn says carefully, "perhaps there is middle ground to be found here. The child poses no immediate threat. Perhaps exile. Let Lord Stark take the boy across the narrow sea, away from Westeros forever." Robert whirls on his hand with wild eyes. Exile? Exile! So he can grow to manhood, plotting his return? So he can gather allies and supporters who remember the Dragon Kings? You counsel me to plant the seeds of future war. Sir Barristan Selmy clears his throat, his white cloak rustling as he steps forward. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard has served 3 kings, but he has never felt the weight of his oath so heavily. "Your Grace, if I may, the child is innocent. Whatever crimes his father may have committed, this babe has done nothing deserving of death. The faith teaches us that innocence must be protected, regardless of blood." But Lord Tywin Lannister moves with the smooth precision of a striking viper. His voice carries the cold logic that has made him the most feared man in Westeros. Sir Barristan speaks of innocence, but I speak of necessity. Your Grace, every day this child lives is a day your enemies can point to Targaryen blood and claim legitimacy. The faith may preach mercy, but the realm requires security. The throne room divides before their eyes. Courtiers whisper nervously among themselves, choosing sides in a conflict that will reshape the 7 kingdoms. The old bonds of loyalty strain and snap under the pressure of impossible choices. Ned looks around the room, seeing the faces of men he once considered friends. Then he looks down at Jon, still watching him with those dark, innocent eyes, and makes the choice that will define the rest of his life. "Your Grace," Ned says, his voice ringing clear in the sudden silence. "If you want this child's blood, you will have to spill mine first. Kill him, and you kill me." The ultimatum hangs in the air like a sword. Robert stares at his oldest friend, the man who stood beside him through rebellion and war, the man who saved his life more times than either can count. For a moment, the mask of kingship slips, and hurt shows naked on his face. You would choose a Targaryen bastard over your king? Over our friendship? Over everything we fought for together? "I choose to keep my promise to my dying sister," Ned replies. "As you would do, if you could think soar past your hatred for 5 minutes. The insult strikes home. Robert's face goes red, then white with fury. When he speaks, his voice is deadly quiet. "Guards, take Lord Stark to the Tower of the Hand. He and the child will remain there under guard until I decide their fate." Armed men in Baratheon colours move forward, their faces grim. They know Ned Stark as a hero of Robert's rebellion, but they serve the king's will above all else. Ned makes no attempt to resist as they form up around him. As the guards escort him from the throne room, Ned turns back to look at Robert one final time. The king sits slumped on the Iron Throne, looking older than his years, surrounded by the whispers of courtiers and the weight of impossible decisions. "This is not what she would have wanted," Ned says quietly. "Lyanna would have wept to see us destroy each other over her son." Robert's only response is to turn his face away. The Tower of the Hand feels like a tomb in the gathering darkness. Ned sits in his solar, Jon sleeping peacefully in a cradleboard beside his chair, seemingly unaware that his existence has just torn a kingdom apart. Through the tall windows, Ned can see the lights of King's Landing spreading below them like fallen stars. A soft knock at the door interrupts his brooding. Ned looks up to see Lord Varys gliding into the room like silk-made flesh, his powdered face showing carefully crafted concern. "Lord Stark," the spider says, his voice soft as a whisper. "I trust you are comfortable." "As comfortable as any prisoner can be," Ned replies. "What do you want, Varys?" The spymaster moves closer, his rings catching the candlelight as he gestures toward Jon's sleeping form. Such a small thing to cause such large consequences. "I confess, my lord, I am impressed by your dedication to family obligations. Speak plainly. I have no patience for riddles tonight." Varys smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. "Very well. I come to offer you information, Lord Stark, and perhaps assistance." "What kind of assistance?" "The kind that ensures certain small birds can fly away safely before the storm breaks in earnest." Varys leans closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. Robert's mind is not the only one turning toward permanent solutions to the problem you represent. Before Ned can respond, commotion erupts in the courtyard below. Shouts and the clatter of hooves echo off the stone walls. Ned moves to the window and looks down to see riders in grey and blue entering the Red Keep's gates under cover of darkness. "Ah," Varys murmurs, joining him at the window. "It seems Lady Catelyn has arrived. How unfortunate. I fear her presence will only complicate an already delicate situation." Ned's heart sinks as he recognizes his wife's auburn hair in the torchlight below. Catelyn rides with a dozen northern guards, their grim faces showing they expect trouble. Her arrival means she learned of his imprisonment, which means word has already spread beyond King's Landing. "She should have stayed at Winterfell," Ned says, quietly. "Perhaps," Varys agrees, "but love makes fools of us all, does it not? Even the wisest women cannot bear to see their husbands and children in danger." The emphasis on children is not lost on Ned. He turns to study the spymaster's face, but Varys's expression reveals nothing. "What do you know?" Ned asks. "I know that storms gather, Lord Stark. I know that choices made in anger often lead to consequences beyond imagination. And I know that sometimes the only way to save what matters most is to sacrifice what matters almost as much." Before Ned can press for more information, Varys glides toward the door with his characteristic silent grace. He pauses at the threshold and speaks without turning around. "Sleep well, Lord Stark. Tomorrow brings new choices for kings and prisoners alike." Alone again, Ned returns to his chair beside Jon's cradleboard. The child sleeps on, innocent of the forces arrayed against him, trusting in the protection of the man who promised his mother to keep him safe. Outside, snow begins to fall again, covering King's Landing in white silence. Winter is coming to the south, bringing with it the promise of war. The ravens fly north like harbingers of war, their black wings cutting through grey autumn skies as news of Lord Stark's imprisonment spreads across the Seven Kingdoms. In castle halls from the Wall to Old Town, lords read the same terrible words. Eddard Stark, Warden of the North and hero of Robert's rebellion, sits in a tower cell for the crime of protecting a child. At River Run, the great castle of House Tully rises from the confluence of two rivers like a stone finger pointed at heaven. In the solar of the River Lords, Hoster Tully reads the raven's message for the third time, his weathered face showing the weight of impossible choices. Across from him, Brandon Stark of Long Lake paces like a caged wolf, his fury barely contained. "This is madness," Brandon snarls, his voice carrying the hard edge of northern steel. Robert has lost his mind if he thinks he can imprison Ned Stark for showing mercy to an infant. Hoster sets the parchment down with careful precision. The Lord of Riverrun has navigated 4 decades of political waters, and he recognizes the storm clouds gathering on every horizon. His daughters are wed to great houses, Catelyn to Ned, Lysa to Jon Arryn. Every choice he makes now will determine whether his grandchildren live to see another winter. Brandon, my boy, you speak of madness, but I see calculation. Robert has been pushed to this by those who profit from division. You speak of Tywin Lannister. I speak of reality. Hoster rises and moves to the great map mounted on his wall, its painted rivers and roads marking the political landscape of Westeros. The king's rage may be real, but someone is feeding that rage, shaping it into a weapon. Brandon stops pacing and faces the old lord directly. Then you know what must be done. The North will not abandon Ned Stark. The question is whether the Riverlands will stand with us or against us. The silence stretches between them like a bridge neither man wants to cross. Hoster's choice will tip the balance of power in Westeros, and both men know it. When he finally speaks, his voice is heavy with regret. I cannot commit the Riverlands to open rebellion based on a raven's word. But neither can I stand aside while good men suffer for showing mercy. Then what do you propose? I propose we gather information. I propose we speak to other lords, gauge their feelings, and I propose we pray that wiser heads than Robert's prevail before this madness goes too far. Meanwhile, far to the north, the ancient fortress of Moat Cailin squats on its causeway, like a stone giant guarding the gateway to the north. The great hall echoes with angry voices as northern lords debate responses to their liege lord's imprisonment. Lord Rickard Karstark slams his fist on the oak table, his grey beard bristling with fury. By the old gods and new, we cannot let this stand. Ned Stark is the blood of the first men, warden of the North. If we let a southern king chain him for showing mercy, what lord among us is safe? Across the table, Lord Roose Bolton speaks with his characteristic quiet menace. Lord Karstark speaks truly. The precedent this sets is troubling. If the king can imprison the warden of the North without trial, without cause beyond his own displeasure, then none of us can sleep safely. Old Lord Umber pounds his drinking horn against the table. Then what do we do? March south and take the boy back by force? Perhaps, Karstark says grimly. The North has never bowed easily to southern kings. We bent the knee to Robert because he won his throne fairly, because Ned vouched for him. But if Robert has turned against Ned... In the corner of the hall, Howland Reed sits in tormented silence. The small lord's weathered face shows the weight of guilt that has only grown heavier since his confession set these events in motion. Every angry word from the northern lords feels like an accusation. Every call for war another consequence of his moment of weakness. Lord Manderley, whose vast bulk makes his chair creak with every movement, speaks with the voice of pragmatism. Before we speak of war, we should know what we face. How many swords does Robert command? How many allies will stand with him against the North? Fewer than he thinks, Bolton says quietly. Lords who bend the knee from fear are not the same as lords who fight from loyalty. Robert's reign is young, his hold on power untested. The debate continues through the night, but no clear consensus emerges. Some call for immediate mobilization, others counsel patience, and a few suggest sending envoys to King's Landing to negotiate. But all agree on one thing. They will not abandon Eddard Stark to southern justice. In King's Landing, the political landscape shifts like sand in a storm. Queen Cersei holds court in her private chambers, receiving a steady stream of visitors who come seeking advantage in the chaos. Today's guest is Lord Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch, whose loyalty can be bought but never trusted. Your Grace, Slynt says with an oily bow, I bring word from the streets. The common folk whisper of the North's anger. They say ravens fly day and night, carrying words of war. Cersei examines her fingernails with affected boredom, but her green eyes miss nothing. And what do these whispers tell you of the mood in the North? That they love their warden more than their king, Your Grace. The merchants who trade northern goods speak of angry lords and sharpened swords. They say the wolf prepares to howl. Interesting. Cersei's smile is cold as winter. And how does the City Watch feel about potential northern visitors? Slynt's own smile mirrors hers. The City Watch serves the crown, Your Grace. We stand ready to maintain order against any threat, northern or otherwise. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned paces his chamber like a caged wolf, Jon sleeping peacefully in a cradleboard near the window. 3 days have passed since his imprisonment, and the weight of inaction gnaws at him like hunger. Through the tall windows, he can see ravens coming and going from the rookery, carrying messages he cannot read, shaping events he cannot control. A soft knock at the door announces another visitor. This time it is Jon Arryn himself, looking older and more careworn than Ned has ever seen him. The hand of the king enters slowly, his weathered face showing the strain of trying to hold the realm together. Ned, my boy, Jon Arryn says, his voice heavy with sorrow. I fear things grow worse by the hour. How so? Jon Arryn moves to the window and stares out at the city below. Word comes from the north. Lords gather at Moat Cailin. Ravens fly to every keep from the wall to White Harbour. Your bannermen do not accept your imprisonment lightly. Ned feels a stab of both pride and dread. They endanger themselves for nothing. I am one man. You are more than one man, Ned. You are the symbol of northern honour, the bridge between the old ways and the new. When Robert imprisoned you, he didn't just cage a lord. He challenged everything the North believes in. And what does Robert say to this? Jon Arryn's expression grows even more troubled. Robert says many things, most of them unfit for repetition. Tywin whispers poison in his ear daily, speaking of northern treachery and the need for decisive action. The Queen smiles and nods and encourages his rage. Ned turns from the window to study his foster father's face. You have a plan. Perhaps. A trial by combat, with your life and the child's fate hanging in the balance. It would satisfy Robert's need for justice while giving you a chance to prove your innocence through trial by battle. And if I lose, then Jon dies, and you die with him. But if you win, if I win, I live as a marked man, forever under suspicion, and Jon grows up knowing his existence nearly destroyed a kingdom. Jon Arryn nods slowly. It's a poor solution, I admit, but it may be the only one that avoids open war. Before Ned can respond, commotion erupts in the courtyard below. They both move to the window to see Catelyn arriving, with a larger escort than before. 50 northern men-at-arms in grey mail and fur cloaks, their faces grim as winter storms. At their head rides Sir Roderick Castle, Master-at-Arms of Winterfell, his white whiskers bristling with barely contained fury. Ah, Jon Arryn murmurs. It seems Lady Catelyn has gathered reinforcements. This will not improve Robert's mood. She should have stayed in the north, Ned says, but his heart lifts at the sight of her. Even imprisoned, even facing an impossible situation, the knowledge that his wife and his people stand behind him fills him with strength. Jon Arryn places a hand on Ned's shoulder. Perhaps she should have. But love rarely counsels caution, and the North has never been known for backing down from a fight. As they watch, more ravens arrive at the rookery, their wings dark against the evening sky. Messages from across the realm, carrying news that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms. In the north, lords sharpen their swords and call their banners. In the Riverlands, Hoster Tully weighs his options with the care of a man balancing on a sword's edge. In the Vale, Jon Arryn's own bannermen whisper of their lord's divided loyalties. And in the Red Keep, in chambers lit by candlelight and warmed by conspiracy, Tywin Lannister spreads gold and promises like seeds in fertile soil, cultivating alliances that will bloom into power when the storm finally breaks. The Game of Thrones has begun in earnest, and at its center lies a sleeping infant, whose only crime is the blood flowing through his veins. The morning sun casts long shadows across the Red Keep's great yard, as Robert Baratheon stands before his assembled court, wearing his crown for the first time since this crisis began. The weight of gold and rubies feels heavier than usual, pressing down on his brow like the burden of kingship itself. Around him, lords and ladies cluster in nervous silence, sensing that history will be made this day. Lords and ladies of the realm, Robert's voice carries across the courtyard with royal authority. We are gathered to witness trial by combat. Lord Eddard Stark stands accused of treason, of harboring the spawn of my greatest enemy, while claiming friendship and loyalty. By the old laws and the new, he has requested trial by combat to prove his innocence. The crowd murmurs with anticipation and dread. Trial by combat is ancient law, sacred to both the old gods and the new. Even kings must honor its verdict, regardless of personal desire. Robert's blue eyes scan the faces before him, seeing fear, excitement, and calculation in equal measure. Ned stands in the center of the yard, flanked by guards but unshackled. In his arms, baby Jon sleeps peacefully, unaware that his fate will be decided by sword and skill. Catelyn stands nearby with her northern escort, her face pale but determined. She has argued through the night for this chance, appealing to every scrap of Robert's remaining love for Lyanna. The accused may name his champion, Robert declares, though his voice lacks enthusiasm. He knows what comes next, and the knowledge sits like poison in his belly. "I name myself, Your Grace," comes a voice from the crowd. Howland Reed steps forward, his small frame seeming even more diminutive in the vast courtyard. Gasps echo from the assembled nobles. The Lord of Greywater Watch is known for his cunning, not his sword skill. To face a royal champion seems like madness. Robert's eyes narrow as he studies the small lord. "You, Lord Reed, you would stand against the crown's champion?" "I would, Your Grace. This crisis began with my words. If there is guilt to be answered for, it is mine as much as Lord Stark's." Howland's voice carries across the yard with surprising strength. "I was there when the child was born. I know the truth of what happened. If the gods judge this matter, let them judge me." Whispers ripple through the crowd, like wind through wheat. The political implications are clear to everyone present. If Howland wins, Ned lives, but remains suspect. If he loses, both men die, and the North loses its greatest lord. Either outcome will reshape the Seven Kingdoms. Robert nods grimly. "Very well. The crown names its champion." He turns to the white-cloaked figure standing beside the Iron Throne's base. "Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. You have served 3 kings with honor. Will you serve the realm's justice in this matter?" Sir Barristan steps forward, his weathered face showing the weight of duty. At 60 years old, he remains one of the finest swords in Westeros, a knight whose legend was forged in battles across 2 decades, but his grey eyes show reluctance as he looks at Howland Reed. Your Grace, I serve at your command, but I would note that Lord Reed is not known as a warrior. Perhaps nothing, Robert snaps. He chose this path. The gods will decide if his choice was wise. Barristan bows stiffly. As you command, Your Grace. The crowd forms a circle around the designated fighting ground, marked with chalk lines on the cobblestones. Servants bring weapons, a long sword for Barristan, and at Howland's request, a spear and small shield in the manner of the Crannogman. The sight draws murmurs from the nobles. Few have seen the weapons of the neck used in formal combat. Tywin Lannister watches from his position near the royal family, his green eyes calculating the political ramifications of every possible outcome. Beside him, Cersei's beautiful face shows barely concealed satisfaction. She cares nothing for Ned Stark's fate, but his destruction weakens Northern power and strengthens her position. Begin, Robert commands. Barristan moves with the fluid grace of a master swordsman, his blade singing through the morning air as he tests its balance. Across from him, Howland crouches low behind his shield, spear held in a defensive grip. The size difference is dramatic. Barristan tall and powerful, Howland small and wiry as a marsh cat. The Lord Commander advances with measured steps, his sword weaving defensive patterns. He has no desire to kill the small lord quickly. Better to give him a chance to yield, to avoid the political complications of his death. But Howland has no intention of yielding. The Crannogman darts forward with surprising speed, his spear thrusting toward Barristan's knee. The knight sidesteps smoothly and riposts, his blade whistling inches from Howland's head. The crowd gasps as the smaller man rolls away, using his shield to deflect a follow-up cut. First blood to the knight, someone calls out, but the wound on Howland's shoulder is shallow. The Crannogman circles warily, his pale eyes studying his opponent's movements with the patience of a hunter in the marshes. As the combat continues, Howland's mind drifts to another fight, in another place. The Tower of Joy, where he stood beside Ned as 3 of the greatest knights in Westeros barred their way. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, had seemed invincible until Howland struck from behind with a poisoned dart. Honourable men called it treachery. Crannogmen called it survival. Barristan presses his attack, his blade work a poetry of steel and skill. But something troubles him. The small lord fights defensively, yes, but there's calculation in his movements. Each retreat seems purposeful, each defensive position carefully chosen. What is he planning? The answer comes as Howland's spear point grazes Barristan's sword arm. The cut is minor, barely breaking the skin, but the knight stumbles slightly. His vision blurs for just a moment, and understanding dawns like a cold sunrise. Poison, Barristan breathes, but his voice carries across the suddenly silent yard. The word hits the crowd like a thunderbolt. Poison in trial by combat is not forbidden by law, but it violates every code of knightly honor. Gasps and shouts erupt from the nobles as they realize what they're witnessing. Robert's face turns purple with rage. You dare use poison in the sight of gods and king? Howland straightens slowly, his spear still ready. I use the tools my people have always used, Your Grace. The gods judge not by method, but by right. Barristan sways on his feet, the toxin working through his system. It's not fatal. Howland is not a murderer, but it saps strength and clouds judgment. The greatest knight in Westeros finds himself helpless against a foe who fights by rules older than chivalry. I yield, Barristan says quietly, his sword dropping from nerveless fingers. The gods have spoken. The silence that follows is deafening. Then chaos erupts as nobles shout accusations, questions, and demands. Robert stares at the scene before him with the expression of a man watching his world crumble. The trial by combat is legally concluded, but its conclusion satisfies no one. Jon Arryn steps forward, his aged voice cutting through the tumult. The law is clear, Your Grace. The gods have rendered their verdict. Lord Stark is innocent of treason. Innocent? Robert's laugh is harsh and bitter. He wins through poison and treachery, and you call it innocence? I call it the judgment of the gods, Jon Arryn replies firmly. Whatever we may think of the method, the law recognizes the result. Robert looks around the yard, seeing the faces of his nobles. Some show satisfaction at the outcome, others disgust at the method, and many simply fear what comes next. The king realizes he faces an impossible choice: honor the law and appear weak, or violate it and appear tyrannical. Tywin Lannister steps forward with perfect timing. Your Grace, perhaps there is wisdom in mercy. Lord Stark has been judged innocent of treason, but the realm's security remains a concern. Exile might serve both justice and prudence. The suggestion hits Robert like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Exile allows him to honor the trial's verdict while removing the problem from his kingdom. It satisfies neither his desire for revenge nor his need for justice, but it offers escape from an impossible situation. Very well, Robert says, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Lord Stark, you are found innocent of treason, but guilty of poor judgment in concealing information vital to the realm's security. You and the child are hereby banished from the 7 kingdoms. You have 7 days to depart, and 7 years of exile to contemplate the consequences of keeping dangerous secrets. Ned accepts the sentence without argument. Exile is life, and life means hope for Jon's future. As guards release his bonds, he cradles the sleeping infant closer to his chest. 7 days, Your Grace. We will be gone within the week. Robert nods curtly, then turns away. He cannot bear to look at Ned's face, cannot bear to see the ghost of the friendship they once shared. As the crowd begins to disperse, whispers spreading like wildfire, the king of the 7 kingdoms feels more alone than ever. Catelyn reaches Ned's side as the guards withdraw, her eyes bright with tears of relief and sorrow. They have won Jon's life, but lost everything else. Winterfell, the North, their children's inheritance, all sacrificed to keep a promise made to a dying woman. Where will we go? She asks quietly. Ned looks down at Jon, who has woken, and stares up at him with dark, curious eyes. Somewhere in those depths, he sees an echo of Lyanna's strength and Rhaegar's fire. Perhaps exile will give the boy a chance to grow up free from the weight of his bloodline. Across the narrow sea, Ned says, to Essos, where dragons once ruled and might rule again. As they walk from the yard together, snow begins to fall once more. Winter has come to King's Landing, and with it, the promise that nothing will ever be the same. The road north from King's Landing stretches before them like a grey ribbon under autumn skies, but Ned Stark no longer travels as the Warden of the North. The escort that surrounds his small party flies no banners, carries no royal writs. They are exiles now, cast out from the realm they helped forge, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and the infant whose existence has torn a kingdom apart. 7 days have passed since the trial by combat, 7 days of preparation for a journey into uncertainty. Catelyn rides beside her husband in silence, baby Jon sleeping peacefully in her arms. The irony is not lost on her. She, who once resented this child, now holds him protectively, understanding that his survival represents something larger than bloodline or bastardy. Behind them, a small procession follows. Sir Roderick Castle, Master-at-Arms of Winterfell, has insisted on accompanying his lord into exile. A handful of northern men-at-arms, their loyalty stronger than royal decree, form a modest escort. And at the rear, in a simple cart, rides old Nan with a few precious belongings saved from their hasty departure. "My lord," Sir Roderick says quietly, riding up beside them. His weathered face shows concern as he points ahead to where dust clouds mark riders approaching from the north. "Company ahead. 20 men, maybe more." Ned's hand moves instinctively to his sword hilt before he stops himself. What good would resistance do now? He has accepted exile, accepted the loss of everything he once held dear. But as the riders draw closer, Ned's breath catches in his throat. Grey banners flutter in the wind. The dire wolf of House Stark, accompanied by the standards of a dozen northern houses. Karstark and Umber, Manderley and Bolton, Reed and Mormont. At their head rides Brandon Stark of Long Lake, his face grim as winter itself. The two groups meet on the King's Road like armies on a battlefield, but no swords are drawn. Instead, Brandon dismounts and approaches on foot, his northern lords following suit. When he reaches Ned, he goes to one knee on the muddy road. "My lord of Winterfell," Brandon says, his voice carrying across the assembled company. "The North has come to escort you home." "Brandon," Ned says quietly, dismounting to clasp the other man's shoulder. "I am no longer Lord of Winterfell. I am no longer anything but an exile under sentence of banishment." Brandon Stark rises, his grey eyes flashing with the fire that has burned in northern hearts for 8,000 years. "You are what you have always been, Ned Stark. You are the blood of the first men, the heir of the kings of winter, and the North remembers its own." The words strike Ned like a physical blow. Around them, the northern lords echo Brandon's sentiment with a chorus of "The North remembers" that sends ravens scattering from nearby trees. Ned looks at these faces, men who have served his family for generations, who owe fealty to his house regardless of southern kings or royal sentences. Lord Rickard Karstark speaks with the blunt honesty of his house. "Robert Baratheon's writ runs to the neck, and no further, my lord. In the north, we choose our own rulers, as we have since the dawn of time." "You speak of treason," Ned warns, but his heart lifts despite the danger in their words. "We speak of independence," Lord Umber growls, his massive frame imposing even among the hardy Northmen. The South has shown its true face. They care nothing for northern honor, northern ways. Why should we bow to kings who despise everything we are? Catelyn watches this exchange with growing understanding. These lords are not simply showing support for her husband. They are offering revolution, the choice of which kingdom to serve, which throne to recognize. For the first time since leaving King's Landing, she sees hope in the faces around her. "What do you propose?" Ned asks quietly. Brandon Stark's smile is cold as winter wind. "We propose that you come home, my lord. We propose that the North govern itself as it did for thousands of years before Aegon's conquest. We propose that baby Jon Snow grow up free of southern poison under the protection of lords who value honor over political expediency." The mention of Jon sends a ripple through the assembled Northmen. They know the truth now. Word has spread through the North like wildfire. The child in Catelyn's arms is not just a bastard, but the son of Lyanna Stark, the last connection to their beloved lady who died too young. Lord Manderley, whose vast bulk makes his horse creak with every movement, speaks with the weight of age and wisdom. The boy represents more than bloodline, Lord Stark. He represents the choice between bending the knee to southern kings who would murder infants for their blood, or standing tall as free men of the North. The political implications, Ned begins, are clear, Lord Bolton interrupts, his pale eyes cold as winter pools. Robert will not forgive this defiance. There will be war, Lord Stark. The only question is whether we fight it as subjects begging for mercy, or as free men defending our homeland. The conversation is interrupted by the thunder of hooves from the south. A lone rider approaches at desperate speed, his horse lathered with sweat and foam. As he draws closer, they recognize the grey of a Stark messenger bearing urgent news from Winterfell. The rider dismounts before his horse has fully stopped, his chest heaving as he gasps out his message. My lords, word from Winterfell. Maester Luwin sends urgent word. Brandon takes the offered scroll, his face darkening as he reads. When he looks up, his expression is grim as a funeral. Robert has declared the North in rebellion. He mobilizes the southern armies, calls upon his banners to march north and restore royal authority. Lord Tywin has been named wartime hand, with authority to use whatever force necessary to bring the North to heel. The news hits like a thunderbolt. Catelyn feels the world shift around her, understanding that there is no middle ground now, no compromise, no peaceful resolution. Robert's rage has driven him to declare war on an entire kingdom. How long do we have? Ned asks. Weeks, perhaps a month, Brandon replies. Winter roads will slow their advance, but they will come. The question is whether we meet them as rebels or as free men defending our homeland. Lord Umber laughs, a sound like boulders grinding together. Then we'd best get moving. Winterfell has stood for 8,000 years. Let's see if it can stand a while longer. As the combined party moves north toward the Neck, toward Winterfell, and the choice that will define their future, Catelyn finds herself thinking of her father at River Run. Hoster Tully faces an impossible decision: support his daughter and son-in-law in their rebellion, or remain loyal to the crown his other daughter serves as sister to the Hand. She makes her own choice as they ride, shifting Jon more securely in her arms. I stand with the North, she says quietly, but her words carry to the men around her. I stand with my husband, and I stand with this child who has done nothing but survive. Meanwhile, far to the south, in the Red Keep's throne room, Robert Baratheon paces before the Iron Throne like a caged beast. The great hall echoes with his furious breathing as Tywin Lannister stands at the map table, calmly planning the destruction of northern independence. They mock me, Robert snarls, his face red with rage and wine. They take my mercy and throw it back in my face like refuse. Well, let them learn what happens when they defy their king. Tywin's smile is cold as winter steel. Indeed, Your Grace, the North has overplayed its hand. When we crush this rebellion, no region will dare question royal authority again. House Stark's defiance will serve as a lesson for all who dream of independence. How many men? Robert asks. 60,000, perhaps 70 when all the southern banners answer. The North can field half that number at most, and they must defend a territory larger than the rest of the 7 kingdoms combined. Robert nods with savage satisfaction. Good. I want every northern lord who supports this madness to pay the price. I want their castles burned, their lands salted. I want the very memory of this rebellion to terrify future generations. But far to the north, in the ancient halls of Winterfell, a different kind of preparation is underway. The great council of the North has gathered, lords great and small, bannermen who have served House Stark since before the conquest, representatives of the mountain clans and the island houses. They gather in the great hall where Brandon the Builder once held court, where countless kings of winter made the decisions that shaped the North. Tonight, they will make history again. Lord Rickard Karstark stands before the assembled company, his voice ringing with conviction. For 300 years, we have bent the knee to southern kings. For 300 years, we have watched our values mocked, our honor questioned, our way of life dismissed as primitive barbarism by silk-clad southerners who know nothing of winter, nothing of the true meaning of loyalty. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the hall. These are men whose ancestors carved kingdoms from frozen wilderness, who held the wall against darkness itself, who remember when the North ruled itself with wisdom and strength. Robert Baratheon has shown his true face, Lord Manderley continues. He would murder infants for the crime of their bloodline. He would destroy the man who saved his kingdom for the sin of showing mercy. He represents everything that is corrupt and weak in southern rule. The great doors of the hall open, and Ned enters with Catelyn and baby Jon. The assembled lords rise as one, their voices joining in a chant that has not been heard in 3 centuries. The King in the North, the King in the North. Ned stops in his tracks, overwhelmed by the sight before him. These lords are not just offering support, they are offering him a crown, offering to restore the kingdom of winter that his ancestors ruled for thousands of years. Brandon Stark of Long Lake approaches with something wrapped in ancient grey silk. When he unfolds it, gasps echo through the hall. The crown of winter, worn by the kings of the North since time immemorial. Its iron circlet set with carved dire wolves and winter roses. The North chooses its king, Brandon says formally, as our fathers chose, as their fathers chose before them. Will you accept the crown, Eddard of House Stark? Will you be our king in the North? Ned looks around the hall, seeing faces that represent everything he values. Honor, loyalty, the bonds that hold civilization together in the face of endless winter. Then he looks down at Jon, sleeping peacefully, despite the momentous decision being made around him. He thinks of Lyanna, of her dying words, of the promise he made to protect her son. In the south, Jon will always be a target, always be a threat to those who fear Targaryen blood. In the north, he can grow up free. I accept, Ned says quietly. I accept the crown, and I swear to defend the north against all enemies, southern or otherwise. The north will be free. Outside Winterfell's ancient walls, snow begins to fall as the first storm of winter arrives. But inside the great hall, the fires burn bright as the kingdom of winter is reborn. The Ruby Ford runs red with blood as the first great battle of the war for Jon Snow erupts along the banks of the Trident. King Robert Baratheon sits his destrier at the center of the southern army, his massive war hammer dripping with the gore of northern soldiers who dared stand against their former king. Around him, 50,000 men in the colors of the crown press forward against the disciplined lines of the north. But this is not the Robert of old, the laughing warrior who won his throne with strength and joy. Wine and rage have transformed him into something harder, colder. His blue eyes burn with obsession as he searches the northern ranks for a glimpse of Ned Stark's banner. Every northern death brings him satisfaction. Every retreat fills him with savage pleasure. Push forward, Robert roars, his voice carrying across the battlefield. No mercy for rebels. No quarter for traitors who shelter dragon spawn. Across the ford, Eddard Stark sits his horse, with the calm dignity of a king who fights to protect rather than conquer. The crown of winter rests on his brow, its iron circlet catching the weak autumn sunlight. Around him, 20,000 northern soldiers hold their ground with the stubborn determination of men defending their homeland. "Hold the line," Ned commands, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Remember what we fight for. Remember why we stand free." The battle rages for hours, neither side able to gain decisive advantage. The Ruby Ford becomes a charnel house as men die for the life of an infant who sleeps peacefully hundreds of miles away in Winterfell's nursery. But as the sun reaches its zenith, northern discipline begins to tell. Their lines bend but do not break. Their retreat is ordered rather than panicked. Lord Bolton appears at Ned's side, his pale eyes showing satisfaction at the carnage below. "The king fights like a madman, Your Grace, but madness is not strategy. If we fall back to the next ford, we can bleed them again." Ned nods grimly. This war will not be won in single battles, but through 1,000 cuts, each one draining Robert's strength while preserving northern forces for the long fight ahead. "Sound the retreat. We've taken our toll for today." Meanwhile, 200 miles to the south, the ancient walls of Riverrun echo with the clash of steel as Sir Jaime Lannister leads the assault on House Tully's ancestral seat. The young knight, barely 21 but already legendary for his skill, cuts through Tully defenders with the golden sword of Lannister authority. Lord Hoster Tully stands on the battlements, watching his castle fall with the bitter resignation of a man caught between impossible choices. His daughter Catelyn has chosen the north, his daughter Lysa serves the Vale, and now the crown demands his submission or destruction. "Yield, my lord," Jaime calls up from the courtyard, his golden hair shining beneath his helm. "Your castle is taken. Your cause is lost. Yield, and your people may yet live." Hoster looks around at the faces of his men, good rivermen who have served his house for decades, now dying because their lord chose the wrong side in a war over a bastard child's life. With heavy heart, he orders the gates opened. "I yield," Hoster says as Jaime approaches. "I yield Riverrun to the crown, and myself to the king's justice." Jaime nods with professional courtesy, but his green eyes show no warmth. "A wise choice, my lord. Your submission will be noted in our reports to His Grace." Far to the north, where ancient stones rise from surrounding marshland, Moat Cailin stands as it has for thousands of years, guardian of the north, impassable barrier against southern invasion. Lord Howland Reed commands the defence, his weathered face showing grim satisfaction as southern armies crash against the causeway, like waves against a stone shore. "They cannot pass," he tells the northern lords gathered in the ancient keep's hall. 10 men can hold this causeway against 1,000. Let Robert bring all his armies. They will break themselves against these walls. But even as the North celebrates its defensive victories, tragedy strikes at the heart of the realm. In King's Landing, Jon Arryn collapses in his solar while reviewing maps of the northern campaign. The aged hand of the king, torn between his love for the fostered sons who now wage war against each other, simply cannot bear the weight of their conflict. Maester Pyxell finds him hours later, slumped over his desk with tears still wet on his cheeks. The last letter Jon Arryn ever wrote lies unfinished before him, a final plea to Robert and Ned to find peace before their war destroys everything they once fought to protect. "The realm weeps for its peacemaker," Pycelle whispers as he closes the dead man's eyes. "Who will counsel mercy now?" With Jon Arryn's death, the last voice of moderation falls silent. Robert receives the news while drunk in his pavilion, surrounded by empty wine cups and battle maps stained with spilled ale. The king's response is a roar of rage that sends his servants fleeing. "Even Jon abandons me," Robert bellows, hurling a wine cup across the tent. "Even the man who raised me like a son cannot bear to watch me do what must be done." Tywin Lannister, now serving as both Hand and Supreme Commander, watches Robert's deterioration with calculating eyes. Each night brings more wine, more rage, more wild plans for northern destruction. The king's obsession with killing Jon Snow has consumed him completely. "Your Grace," Tywin says carefully, "perhaps it is time to consider terms. The North fights with winter at their backs, and our supply lines grow longer each day." "Terms?" Robert's laugh is harsh as breaking glass. "I'll give them terms. I'll give them steel and fire until every northern lord bows or bleeds." But while Robert rages and drinks, the North adapts and endures. At Seaguard, the last great battle for the Riverlands unfolds as northern forces attempt to relieve the siege of Lord Jason Mallister's castle. The engagement ends in defeat for the North, but even in retreat, their discipline impresses their enemies. Sir Jaime Lannister watches the northern withdrawal with professional admiration. "They fight like cornered wolves," he tells his captains, "dangerous even in defeat." The political implications of the northern resistance ripple across Westeros like stones cast in still water. On the Iron Islands, Lord Balon Greyjoy studies reports of the war with the calculating gaze of a man who sees opportunity in chaos. His young son Theon sits beside him, eager for adventure and glory. "The Dragon Kings are gone. The stag and wolf tear each other apart," Balon muses. "Perhaps it is time for the Kraken to stretch its tentacles once more." In Dorne, Prince Oberyn Martell reads the same reports with very different eyes. The Red Viper has no love for Robert Baratheon, the man who condoned the murder of Targaryen children. If the North can bleed the crown, if they can weaken Robert's hold on power, perhaps justice for old wrongs might yet be found. "Send ravens to our friends in the North," Oberyn tells his brother Doran. "Let them know that Dorne remembers its grievances against the usurper. Coin, supplies, information, whatever aid we can provide without open declaration." As winter deepens its grip on the Seven Kingdoms, the war takes on new dimensions. Northern troops, bred to hardship and cold, fight with increasing advantage as southern soldiers struggle with frost and snow. Supply wagons bog down in muddy roads, and horses die in growing numbers from the bitter weather. In the Great Hall of Winterfell, King Eddard Stark holds court with his bannermen, planning the defense of their newborn kingdom. Baby Jon sleeps in his cradle nearby, tended by old Nan, while his fate is debated by lords and generals. The infant has grown during the months of war, his dark eyes alert and curious when awake. "The boy thrives," Lord Karstark observes with satisfaction. "He grows strong, while the South bleeds itself dry, trying to kill him." "Robert's obsession works in our favor," Lord Manderley adds, his vast bulk making his chair creak with every gesture. "A king consumed by personal hatred makes poor strategic decisions. Each day he continues this war, more lords question his judgment." Ned studies the maps spread before him, marking the positions of armies across the continent. The war that began over one child's life has engulfed half the realm and shows no signs of ending. In the south, Robert's forces control the Riverlands, but cannot penetrate northern defences. In the north, the Kingdom of Winter stands free but isolated, dependent on the harshness of winter to protect what courage and steel have won. "How long can we hold?" Catelyn asks quietly, joining the council with reports from their ravens. "As long as winter lasts," Ned replies. And in the north, winter can last for years. Outside Winterfell's ancient walls, snow falls in heavy curtains, blanketing the kingdom in white silence. The war for Jon Snow has become something larger, a struggle between old ways and new, between northern independence and southern dominion, between the honor of protecting innocence and the pragmatism of political murder. In his pavilion beside the frozen trident, King Robert drinks alone, staring at maps he no longer understands, fighting a war he can no longer remember why he started. The only constant in his mind is the image of a silver-haired child who must die for sins that exist only in a broken king's imagination. The realm bleeds, winter deepens, and somewhere in the distance, ravens carry news that will reshape the Seven Kingdoms once again. The great ledger books of King's Landing tell a story written in blood and gold. Grandmeister Pycelle runs his finger down endless columns of numbers, each entry representing lives lost in what the small folk have begun calling the Bastards' War. 20,000 dead at the Ruby Ford, 15,000 at the Siege of River Run, 8,000 more in a dozen smaller battles across the Riverlands and the Neck. 60,000 gold dragons spent on weapons alone this moon, Pycelle reports to the small council, his voice trembling with exhaustion. The royal treasury bleeds faster than our armies. Tywin Lannister studies the reports with the calculating gaze of a man who profits from chaos. As Hand of the King, he controls both the war effort and the realm's finances, a position that allows him to shape the conflict to Lannister advantage. Every royal debt creates dependence. Every northern victory justifies harsher measures. Every southern loss demands Lannister intervention. The cost is substantial, Tywin agrees, his voice showing no concern for the human toll. But necessary. The North's rebellion threatens the very foundation of royal authority. We cannot allow sentiment to override strategic necessity. Across the table, Lord Stannis Baratheon's jaw tightens with barely contained fury. Robert's younger brother has watched his king descend into obsessive madness while the realm burns around them. Strategic necessity? Stannis's voice cuts like a blade. We're bankrupting the crown to hunt down a toddling child. The words hang in the air like a challenge. Everyone present knows the truth, that this war has consumed the Seven Kingdoms' wealth and stability for the life of a boy who has barely learned to walk. But none dare say it aloud, except Stannis, whose rigid sense of duty compels him to speak truth regardless of consequences. The child represents a threat to the dynasty, Tywin replies smoothly. Targaryen blood flows in half the noble houses of Westeros, Stannis snaps. Should we slaughter every lord with silver hair? Should we murder every child whose grandmother might have been a dragon's daughter? The argument is interrupted by the arrival of a mud-spattered messenger bearing news from the front. The man's face shows the strain of hard travel, and his message brings worse tidings still. Report from the twins, my lords. Lord Frey has changed his allegiance. Tywin's green eyes narrow dangerously. Explain. He opened his gates to northern forces, my lord. Let King Eddard's army cross unopened, while our forces were caught on the wrong side of the river. The rearguard was slaughtered, my lord. 3,000 men. The silence that follows is deafening. Walder Frey's betrayal has cut the southern army in half, stranding Robert's forces north of the river, while northern reinforcements pour south. The strategic implications are catastrophic. The late Lord Frey chooses his moment well, Tywin observes with cold admiration. He waits to see which king will emerge victorious, then backs the winner. In the north, word of Frey's betrayal reaches Winterfell, as King Eddard prepares for what may be the war's decisive battle. The great hall echoes with the voices of lords planning their advance. But in the royal chambers above, a different scene plays out. Catelyn sits by the great hearth, watching young Jon Snow, play with wooden toys carved by the castle's carpenters. The boy has grown during the months of war, his dark hair thickening, his grey eyes bright with intelligence. He babbles happily in the mixture of words and sounds that mark a child beginning to speak. "Mama," Jon says, reaching toward Catelyn with chubby fingers. "Mama, up!" The words pierce Catelyn's heart like a blade. This child, who calls her mother while his true mother lies dead in Dorne, has no understanding of the war being fought over his existence. To Jon, the world is a place of warmth and safety, where kind faces smile and gentle hands provide comfort. "All of this for you, little one," Catelyn whispers, lifting Jon to her lap. "Thousands of men dying, kingdoms bleeding, all because you drew breath in this world." A commotion in the courtyard draws her attention to the window. Riders approach under banners she recognizes. Howland Reed and his crannogmen, returning from the latest battle with grim news written on their faces. Lord Reed moves stiffly as he dismounts, and Catelyn notices dark stains on his leather armor that speak of wounds poorly healed. Later that evening, Catelyn learns the full scope of the war's cost. In the Great Hall, Howland Reed addresses the assembled northern lords with the weight of guilt heavy in his voice. 600 dead at Seaguard, he reports. 400 more at the skirmish near Salt Pans. Good northern lads, all of them. Buried in southern soil because I couldn't keep my mouth shut in a tavern. The small lord's face shows the toll of endless battle and sleepless nights. Since the war began, he has fought like a man seeking death, taking impossible risks, volunteering for the most dangerous missions. His guilt over starting this conflict drives him to seek redemption through blood and steel. "It was not your fault alone," Lord Karstark says firmly. "We all chose this path. We all decided to stand against the South." "Did we?" Howland's laugh is bitter as winter wind. "Or did my loose tongue force us all into a war we never wanted?" The question hangs unanswered as ravens arrive with news that chills every heart in the hall. Robert Baratheon himself rides north at the head of 20,000 men, seeking personal combat with the king in the north. The two former friends will meet in battle, and one will not survive the encounter. Meanwhile, in the south, common folk speak in hushed voices about the Bastards' War. In taverns and markets, on docks and in fields, the same questions echo. Why do their betters fight over one child? Why must their sons die for Targaryen blood? Why does the realm bleed for the pride of kings? "All for one bastard boy," an old woman mutters in a King's Landing tavern, her words carrying the weight of a mother who has lost 3 sons to the fighting. All this death and ruin for one babe who should have been left to live in peace. Her words find echo throughout the 7 kingdoms. In the Reach, farmers struggle to plant crops while their sons march to war. In the Westerlands, mines produce gold that flows immediately to fund more battles. In the Stormlands, widows weep for husbands who died fighting Northmen they had no quarrel with. The economic devastation spreads like plague. Trade routes become battlefields, merchant ships carry soldiers instead of goods, and the price of grain doubles, then triples, as fields go untended. What began as a political crisis has become a catastrophe that touches every life in Westeros. In his pavilion beside the Green Fork, King Robert Baratheon studies maps by candlelight, his massive hands shaking from wine and rage. The man who once conquered a kingdom through strength and charisma has become a shadow of himself, consumed by an obsession he can no longer clearly explain. "Tomorrow we find Ned," he tells his captains, his voice slurred with drink. "Tomorrow this madness ends, one way or another." Ser Jaime Lannister watches his king with growing concern. The young knight has fought in 12 battles during this war, has seen Robert's tactical brilliance replaced by reckless fury. Tomorrow's battle will not be won by strategy, but by hatred, and hatred makes for poor generalship. Your Grace, perhaps if we— No more talk, Robert roars, hurling his wine cup across the tent. I'll have Ned's head on a spike, and that dragon spawn's corpse beside it. I'll end this war with my own hands. Far to the north, in a parallel camp flying the grey banners of House Stark, Eddard prepares for his own confrontation with destiny. The crown of winter rests on a table beside his armor, its iron circlet reflecting firelight like dark water. Tomorrow he will face the man who was once his brother in all but blood, and one of them will die for the life of Lyanna's son. Howland Reed enters the royal tent without ceremony, his weathered face showing determination, mixed with resignation. Your Grace, I ask permission to ride in your vanguard tomorrow. Howland, you're wounded. You should rest. I cannot rest while this war continues, the small lord replies. It was my words that started this conflict. Let my death end it, if the gods will it so. Ned studies his bannerman's face and sees the truth there. Howland Reed has already decided to die tomorrow, seeking atonement for the chaos his confession unleashed. No words will dissuade him from this path. Then ride with honor, Ned says quietly, and know that history will remember your courage, not your guilt. As midnight approaches, both camps fall into uneasy silence. Soldiers check weapons and armor, write letters to families they may never see again, and pray to gods old and new for strength in the coming battle. The war for Jon Snow has reached its climax, and by tomorrow's sunset, either a kingdom will be saved, or a rebellion will be crushed. In Winterfell's nursery, young Jon Snow sleeps peacefully in his cradleboard, dreaming innocent dreams, while two armies prepare to kill each other over his right to draw breath. The child who has torn a realm apart rests in perfect peace, unaware that his very existence has become the fulcrum upon which the future of Westeros balances. Outside, snow falls like tears from heaven, covering the world in white silence, while war comes with the dawn. The throne room of the Red Keep echoes with the labored breathing of a dying king. Robert Baratheon slumps on the Iron Throne like a broken giant, his massive frame reduced by fever, infection, and the poison of endless wine. The wounds from his personal combat with Ned Stark have never properly healed, festering in his flesh like the hatred that consumes his mind. Your Grace, Tywin Lannister says from the base of the throne, his voice carrying the authority of a man who rules in all but name. The reports from Dorne require immediate attention. Prince Doran has formally renounced his oath of fealty. They fly their own banners now, declaring independence from the Iron Throne. Robert's bloodshot eyes struggle to focus on the map Tywin holds. 3 years of war have aged the king decades, turning his golden hair grey and his powerful body into a ruin of infected wounds and pickled organs. When he speaks, his voice is a broken whisper. Dorne always hated us. Let them burn in their desert. Tywin's green eyes show neither surprise nor concern at Robert's incoherent response. The hand of the king has grown accustomed to ruling without royal input, making decisions that serve Lannister interests while the realm collapses around them. Each day brings new reports of chaos, new regions declaring independence, new proof that the Seven Kingdoms exist only in name. There are other matters, Your Grace. The Iron Islands have resumed their raids along the western coast. Without the royal fleet to stop them, Lord Balon grows bold, and the Faith Militant has seized control of the great sept of Baelor, demanding the crown answer for the sins of unjust war. Robert attempts to rise from the throne, but the effort sends spasms of pain through his diseased body. The infected wound in his side, earned when Ned Stark's sword found its mark 3 months ago, weeps constantly through his bandages. The Maesters speak of corruption in his blood, of organs failing one by one, but Robert refuses their ministrations in favor of wine and rage. The faith dares question. Question me. Robert's words come in gasping bursts. I am the king, anointed by the Seven themselves. From her position beside the throne, Queen Cersei watches her husband's deterioration with calculating eyes. Her golden hair falls in perfect waves around a face that shows no grief for Robert's condition, only cold assessment of opportunity. Beside her stands 3-year-old Prince Joffrey, his green eyes bright with childish curiosity about his father's strange behavior. Perhaps, my love, Cersei says with false sweetness, it is time to consider the succession. Young Joffrey must be prepared for his responsibilities. The suggestion hits Robert like a physical blow. He stares at the golden-haired child who bears no resemblance to him, seeing only another reminder of his failures. In his fever dreams, he sometimes confuses Joffrey with Jon Snow, seeing Targaryen silver where there is only Lannister gold. The boy, the dragon boy, Robert mutters, his mind wandering the paths of madness. Must find, must kill, Lyanna's boy. Stannis Baratheon steps forward from his position among the courtiers, his jaw rigid with disgust at his brother's condition. The Lord of Dragonstone has watched this war destroy everything they fought to build during the rebellion, and his patience has reached its end. Enough, Stannis says, his voice cutting through the throne room's oppressive atmosphere. This madness must stop. The realm bleeds while you chase phantoms, brother. The war is lost, the kingdom fragments, and you babble about killing children. Robert's eyes fix on Stannis with a flicker of their old fire. For a moment, the dying king remembers what he once was, and fury gives him strength. Lost! Lost! The North will burn. Every lord who defied me will hang. Every man who protected that dragon spawn will... The effort of shouting sends Robert into a coughing fit that sprays blood across the throne's armrests. Guards move forward in alarm, but Tywin waves them back with casual authority. Let the king die publicly. Let the realm see the cost of his obsession. Meanwhile, far to the north, a very different scene plays out in the great hall of Winterfell. King Eddard Stark holds court with his bannermen, the crown of winter gleaming on his brow as he receives reports of victory from across the 7 kingdoms. But the taste of triumph is bitter, seasoned with the knowledge of what this independence has cost. Dawn has declared for us, Lord Manderley reports, his vast bulk making his chair creak with satisfaction. They offer trade agreements and mutual defense against any southern invasion. The Reach wavers, and the Storm lands fragment into petty kingdoms. Ned nods grimly, understanding that their victory comes not from northern strength, but from the realm's collapse. Robert's obsessive war has shattered the unity that Aegon the Conqueror forged 3 centuries ago, leaving a continent of squabbling kingdoms where once stood an empire. And what of our own losses? Ned asks. Heavy, Your Grace, Lord Karstark admits. 15,000 northern dead, farms burned, villages destroyed. We have our independence, but half our young men lie buried in southern soil. The report weighs on Ned like a stone. Every northern death feels personal. Every widow's tears a judgment on his choices. He thinks of Howland Reed, found dead on the field at the Green Fork with a dozen arrows in his body, finally finding the redemption he sought through sacrifice. A commotion in the corridor announces new arrivals. Catelyn entering with young Jon Snow, now a bright 3-year-old, whose dark hair and grey eyes mark him unmistakably as a Stark. The child runs ahead of his guardian, his voice bright with excitement. "Father! Father! Old Nan told stories about dragons." Ned lifts his son into his arms, marvelling at how the child has grown during the years of war. Jon knows nothing of the conflict fought over his life, understands only that he is loved and protected in the halls of his ancestors. To him, the stories of dragons are exciting tales, not reminders of the blood that flows in his veins. "Did she now?" Ned says with forced lightness. "And what did you think of these dragon stories?" "They fly very high," Jon says solemnly, "but old Nan says the wolves are stronger in winter." The innocent words send a chill through the assembled lords. This child, who speaks of dragons and wolves as creatures of legend, carries in his blood the potential to reshape the world. His existence has already torn apart one kingdom. What might he accomplish when he reaches manhood? Back in King's Landing, Robert's condition continues to deteriorate as night falls over the capital. The king has been moved to his chambers, where he lies delirious with fever, while Tywin and the small council plan the realm's future without him. "The succession must be secured," Grand Maester Pycelle says, nervously, his chains clinking as he shuffles through medical texts. Prince Joffrey is the rightful heir, but questions of legitimacy may arise given the current circumstances. Tywin's smile is cold as winter steel. "There will be no questions about Prince Joffrey's legitimacy. I will ensure that personally." But even as they plan for Robert's death and Joffrey's coronation, the realm continues its inexorable collapse. Ravens arrive hourly with news of fresh disasters. The Riverlands ravaged by bandits, the Crown Lands emptying as small folk flee to safer regions, the royal fleet scattered or destroyed by Greyjoy raiders. In his fevered sleep, Robert dreams of the Tower of Joy, of Lyanna dying in a bed of blood while he stood powerless to save her. But in his dreams, the child she bears has silver hair and purple eyes, and it grows with each telling until it becomes a dragon that burns away his kingdom with its breath. "Lyanna," Robert whispers in his delirium, his voice barely audible above the wind rattling the windows. "Forgive me. Couldn't save, couldn't protect." Queen Cersei sits beside her husband's deathbed with the patience of a spider waiting for her web to be complete. Each labored breath brings her closer to true power, closer to the moment when her son will sit, the Iron Throne, and House Lannister will rule through him. "Soon," she whispers, though whether to comfort or threaten, none can say. As dawn breaks over a fractured continent, the war for Jon Snow enters its final phase. In the north, a child plays with wooden toys while his existence continues to reshape the world. In the south, a king dies of his own hatred while his kingdom crumbles around him. And across the Seven Kingdoms, common folk wonder if the realm of Aegon the Conqueror can ever be whole again, or if the price of one child's life has proven too high for any throne to bear. The dragons are gone, the wolves run free, and winter has come at last to claim what summer built. The bells of King's Landing toll the death of a king as Robert Baratheon draws his final breath in the royal chambers of the Red Keep. His massive frame, once capable of splitting men in half with a war hammer, lies still and broken on silk sheets stained with blood and wine. The fever that has consumed him for weeks finally claims its victory, leaving behind only the shell of a man who destroyed himself in pursuit of an impossible revenge. "Rhaegar's spawn," Robert whispers with his dying breath, the words barely audible above the sound of rain lashing the windows. Should have Should have killed. Queen Cersei watches her husband die without shedding a tear. Her golden hair catches the candlelight as she turns to the assembled lords, her voice cutting through the chamber's oppressive silence with cold authority. The king is dead. Long live King Joffrey, first of his name, rightful ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. But even as the words leave her lips, Cersei knows they ring hollow. The Seven Kingdoms that Aegon the Conqueror forged with dragon fire exist now only in memory. What remains is a fractured continent where petty kings squabble over the ruins of an empire torn apart by one man's obsession with a child's blood. In the throne room, young Joffrey sits upon the Iron Throne, his golden curls catching the light filtering through the great windows. At barely 4 years old, the boy king requires a cushion to reach the throne's armrests, and his feet dangle inches above the floor. Around him, lords kneel with varying degrees of conviction, their oaths of fealty hollow words spoken to a child who rules a kingdom that no longer exists. Lord Stannis Baratheon stands apart from the assembled courtiers, his jaw rigid with contempt. When called upon to swear fealty to his nephew, his refusal echoes through the hall like the crack of a breaking sword. "I do not kneel to bastards," Stannis declares, his voice carrying across the throne room with implacable authority. "Robert left no true-born heir. By right of blood and law, I am the rightful king of Westeros." The words hit the court like a thunderbolt. Accusations of bastardy, questions of legitimacy, the realm dividing along lines of blood and ambition. Within hours, ravens fly from Dragonstone, bearing Stannis's claim to the throne, backed by the Red Priestess Melisandre and her promises of divine favor. But Stannis is not the only claimant to emerge from the chaos. In the Reach, Renly Baratheon gathers the flower of southern chivalry around his banners, promising a return to the glory days before Robert's madness consumed the realm. Handsome, charismatic, and backed by the wealth of House Tyrell, Renly presents himself as the king who can heal the realm's wounds. "The realm needs a king who can unite rather than divide," Renly proclaims to the assembled lords at Highgarden. "I offer peace where Stannis promises only duty, prosperity where Joffrey brings only chaos." Meanwhile, far to the north, a very different coronation unfolds in the Great Hall of Winterfell. King Eddard Stark receives formal recognition from the remaining free kingdoms, Dorne, the Iron Islands, and several Riverland holdouts who refuse to bend the knee to any southern claimant. "The Kingdom of Winter stands free and independent," Ned declares to the assembled lords, the crown of winter gleaming on his brow. "We bow to no southern king, acknowledge no foreign authority. The North remembers its own and protects its own." In the gallery above, 5-year-old Jon Snow watches the ceremony with bright, curious eyes. The boy has grown tall for his age, his dark hair falling across grey eyes that show the quick intelligence of his Stark blood. Unlike the royal children in the south, Jon knows exactly who he is and where he comes from. "Uncle Ned," Jon says later as they walk through Winterfell's Godswood, "Old Nan says my father was a dragon prince. Why don't I have silver hair like the dragons in her stories?" Ned stops beside the ancient heart tree, its carved face seeming to watch them with knowing eyes. For years he has dreaded this conversation, but the boy deserves truth rather than comfortable lies. "Your father was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen," Ned says gently, "but you are your mother's son as much as his. You have Lyanna's strength, her fierce heart, her love of justice. The dragon's fire burns in you, but so does the wolf's loyalty." Jon considers this with the seriousness that marks all his thoughts. Is that why the southern kings wanted to kill me? Because I'm a dragon? "They feared what you might become," Ned explains. But here in the north, you are simply Jon Snow, son of Winterfell, heir to the kingdom of winter. Your blood makes you what you are, but your choices will make you who you become. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of ravens bearing news from across the narrow sea. Maester Luwin approaches with scroll in hand, his weathered face showing surprise at the message's contents. Your Grace, word from the free cities. A young woman claiming to be Daenerys Targaryen has emerged in Pentos. She asks after her nephew's health. Ned reads the message with growing amazement. The last Targaryen princess, barely more than a child herself, reaches across the narrow sea to make contact with Jon. The letter speaks of dreams and dragons, of family bonds stronger than oceans, of a future where the dragon's children might unite rather than destroy. She knows about me? Jon asks, reading over Ned's shoulder with the fearless curiosity of youth. It seems the dragon's blood calls to dragon's blood, Ned replies. Your aunt wishes to know you live and prosper. As the years pass, the fractured realm settles into its new reality. In the south, 3 kings wage intermittent war while their people suffer. Joffrey's cruelty drives lords to rebellion. Stannis' righteousness wins him few friends, and Renly's charm cannot overcome the realm's exhaustion with war. But in the north, peace and prosperity flourish under King Eddard's wise rule. Jon grows from child to youth to young man, learning statecraft from his uncle, swordplay from Sir Roderick Castle, and the ways of the old gods from the heart trees of the Godswood. Catelyn watches Jon's development with wonder at how much her own heart has changed. The boy she once resented as a symbol of her husband's dishonor has become the son she never bore, fierce and loyal and good. When Jon calls her mother, her heart swells with pride rather than pain. You were right to save him, she tells Ned one evening, as they watch Jon practice sword work in the yard below their window. Whatever the cost, whatever the price, you were right to keep Lyanna's promise. 20 years after Robert's death, as snow falls gently on Winterfell's ancient stones, a mature Jon Snow stands before the statue of his mother in the crypts below the castle. Now a man grown, with the lean strength of a wolf and the quiet charisma of a dragon, he has become everything Ned hoped and Lyanna dreamed. Mother, Jon says quietly, his breath misting in the cold air. I finally understand what Uncle Ned tried to tell me all those years ago. You died to give me life, but your son lived to tear apart a kingdom. The North stands free because of my birth, but the South bleeds still because of my blood. He places a winter rose on Lyanna's tomb, the blue petals dark against the grey stone. Around him, the spirits of Stark kings seem to whisper their approval, their acceptance of the dragon's child, who became a wolf in truth. I cannot change what my existence cost this realm, Jon continues, but I can choose how to honor that sacrifice. The North will stand as a beacon of justice, a refuge for the innocent, a kingdom worthy of the price paid in blood and tears. Above in the great hall, lords and ladies gather for the evening feast, their voices warm with laughter and song. The kingdom of winter prospers while the southern realms struggle with endless war. Here, at least, Lyanna's son has found peace. But across the narrow sea, dragons stir in the east, and Daenerys Targaryen dreams of home. The Game of Thrones is far from over, and the blood of the dragon runs strong in more than one survivor of House Targaryen. The North remembers, winter endures, and somewhere in the distance, the promise of spring whispers of changes yet to come. The war for Jon Snow is ended, but the song of ice and fire plays on, echoing through the halls of history like the memory of words spoken in love and desperation by a dying woman in a tower of joy. Promise me, Ned. Promise me. The promise was kept. The price was paid. And in the end, perhaps that is enough.